record this on the computer for you guys to see later. And I'm at the supply or at the math review, and that's our first homework assignment you guys are going to be turning in just a little while, about a week. I'll give you guys particular information on that. So if you have any questions right now, I see things going in chat, but any general questions before we get started? Okay.
So Professor, for the homework, we print it from this program, from the Ignithium.
Yeah, that's right.
And then we, once we do our work on it, we just scan it in and onto a Word document, and then just submit that through Blackboard.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Got it.
So
okay.
yeah. And that way, again, you guys can do as much practice as you want, but you can still do the homework. What we really care about, like I said, is substantial completeness, which means that you tried every problem, you documented your work and what you did, and if you got stuck, you can explain why you got stuck. You know, you would be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't be, Stephen, if you know, you were in my position, you could see the difference between a student that's a really good student and a student that has the potential to be a really good student. And it's so small in many cases, because what it boils down to is the person that ends up actually mastering the material, doing better, simply just gets stuck and figures out why they're stuck. They didn't understand a definition, they don't know a formula, they go look it up. But the other people, they get stuck and they don't really investigate. And so anyway, it's a good habit. Like I said, if you get to a point in a question and you really don't know how to do it, figuring out why, and then at least you can ask a question to somebody. Say, like, listen, if I just understood what this meant or how to do this part of it, I'd be okay. But you'd be surprised at how many people just go, I don't know, and that's the end of their answer.
Right. Now, is there on the schedule, is there a place where it shows when each homework assignment is due, or are we just going to go over that in class?
Yeah, so you'll never be surprised, because I'll post due dates on Blackboard, and I'll always post in enough time so you have some lead time. And obviously, if you do what you're supposed to do and you're supposed to regularly attend lecture and stuff like that, you won't have any issues. But yeah, we pace the material kind of based on our progress. We'll get finished with the core part of the class, which I already explained. There are 3 main topics that we want to cover. But that's, you know, some stuff might take us a little bit longer or a little bit shorter, depending upon where the class is. And then there are some additional topics at the end of the class, which you can see, like the stuff down at the bottom. So the externalities and the public goods stuff, whether or not we get a chance to really spend a lot of time on that really kind of depends upon our pace. But we want to make sure that we cover the other topics thoroughly first. So that's how we'll do it, and you'll have a heads up. So don't worry. So the first thing that I want to do, and I'll actually ask you guys and girls, you know, listen, just so you all know, I'm completely in favor of using gender neutral pronouns when possible. And that's the way that I use guys, but I know that typically that sounds like it's masculinized, and it's only because I haven't found a good substitute. So if somebody has a good suggestion, let me know. For me, everybody in the class is important, and I want you guys all to feel that. So the only way that I've been able to kind of get around that to make sure that everybody feels, included, is to say you all, but it makes me sound like I'm Southern. I'm not. So if you all have a good suggestion, that's where I kind of get a little bit stuck with the language sometimes. Anyway, so let's go to question number 1.
Professor,
And yeah, go ahead.
There's a question in the chat box. I don't know if you managed to get to it. It says, can we copy the questions to another sheet to give us more room?
Oh yeah, and you guys are gonna have to play around with this a little bit, but I'll tell you, the way that it normally works is people get the questions, and that's kind of like a cover page. Sometimes it covers more than a page, and then on the pages behind that, that's where they actually answer the questions and put their work. Okay. So if you want to arrange it a different way, it's not a big deal for me. But I will tell you that the procedure when we do exams, the assessments that we're going to do for this class, it's going to be really similar to the way that you're doing your homework. I mean, there's a little bit of difference in that we actually do input our final answers into Ignithium, so they can be scored on by the algorithm in the back, and then I check your work. But I'm still going to have you turn in your exam page and your work behind it. And on that, I have to insist that you do it that way. So maybe you want to practice with the homeworks. But yeah, the whole idea is that it's like a cover page, and then you put your answers that you write by hand yourselves behind that. Okay, so I don't know if there's another really important question, but we can save some of those for the end. And so, okay, so let me ask, so Daniel Sanchez, are you here this morning?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so Daniel, I'll put you as being up. And how about Tian Hui? Are you here? Okay, I'm not getting Tian Hui. Okay. Are you there? Okay, Tian Hui unmuted and disappeared.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, okay. Tian Hui, how are you doing?
Hi, good.
Yeah, okay. So I want you, and let's talk for a minute, and my other friend, Daniel Sanchez. Let's talk about question number 1.
Okay.
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 Okay. So do you guys have a suggestion on how to do it? What would you do?
Triangle with height.
So I would it says, okay, so it's always for the triangle, it's base times height, right? And then divided.
Yeah.
That's the
1/2
formula,
base
right?
times height. Yep.
So the first thing I would want to do is pick out what I can put in the formula from the problem. So like I was given height and I was given the base. So I would add up all the in a base that equals 9 and 4 and 5, right? So I would add all that up, right? So that would be 13 plus 5, 18. And
Right.
then multiply 18 times 70. And then I would divide that.
Yeah, okay. And that's fair. And what do you think about that, Tian Hui?
Yes.
So you agree with Daniel?
Actually, no.
Okay, do you want to tell me why you object?
I suggest just use the 70 multiplied by 9. No,
Yeah.
no. Times 9 multiplied
Okay.
by
1/2. Right.
1.5.
Yeah.
That's my suggestion.
That's your suggestion. And you know
Yeah.
what I want to point out, the reason why
Uh-huh.
this question is here is there's an error in it. So I'm not saying what Daniel suggested was unreasonable or what you suggested was unreasonable, but it's ambiguous. And I left it this way because I wanted to point out to you all that when you're working with Ignithium, occasionally you're going to see stuff that just doesn't make sense. And so you have to bring your knowledge and be reasonable in your interpretation of the question. And if the question doesn't make sense, you see this little change problems button,
Uh-huh.
you hit it. Now the question makes sense, right?
Uh-huh.
Do you agree, Daniel?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So I bringing this up at the beginning, and hopefully you guys all write it down and you see a little star. You're probably going to answer, I don't know. I mean, in terms of what you're responsible for, you're probably going to be responsible for, I don't know, like 80 or 90 different problems this semester. And hopefully, if you guys do your practice properly, by the time of the end of the semester, you will, answered each one of those questions 5 or 6 times. So you're going to do like 500 problems on this website before the semester's over with. And out of that 500, you're probably going to find 5 of them that just don't make sense based on the models and the formulas and the context. So be on the lookout and make sure that you agree that the problem seems reasonable before you answer it. And if it doesn't seem reasonable, then do another draw, which when I do the change problems, remember, that's the random engine that's populating in the back. Okay. So let's go ahead and I'll have you, Daniel and Tanhui, you guys can both, and everybody else too, work on numbers 1, 2, and 3. And then we'll talk about the answers in just a moment. Does anybody have a question? Okay. So what I do also a lot during the morning session is I'll say, okay, these couple people are going to be in charge of, helping us answer the questions. That's like their participation for the activity, and I choose different people on different days. And, you should have a mic available. If you don't have a mic available, try to get access to one. The video stuff is optional. I like to see people's faces just because it's nice. It feels more personal. But if for whatever reason, your streaming doesn't work well, or, you got up and your hair is funky and you don't want to put your camera on, that's okay with me. But we should be able to talk with each other so we can work through the problems. And obviously, you guys know, if you don't like your background, there are options on the preference menu for Zoom, and you can like pick a different background. I do that sometimes. So, okay, so Daniel and Tanwi, what I normally do is I'll say, okay, you guys work on these questions, and then obviously other people can answer too. We just know we have a couple of designated people to do it. And actually, I'll pick one other person. And how about Michael left?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, your name is famous right now.
Is it?
Oh yeah. So the stuff that's going on with GameStop right now?
Oh yeah, no, Andrew left. Yeah, no, that's actually my younger brother. I mean, well, not literally him, but like he has the same name.
It's the same name as your brother. Yeah. So anyway, okay, Mr. Left, you're our third person to refer to. And so I'll give you guys, you probably only need like 2 minutes to do this, but I'll give you 2 minutes. I'm gonna stop my video and I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back. And so since we have 3 people, let's go ahead and we'll do one at a time. So Daniel Sanchez, did you go ahead and calculate the answer for number 1?
Yes, I did. So I got the area as 216 because I multiplied 54 times 8 and divided that by 2. And that was the answer I
Okay, yay, Daniel.
got.
Good job. Okay, so what about you, Tanwi, number 2? Our Tianhui, number 2. Okay, how about Michael Left for number 3, and we'll wait. Oh, Tianhui, did you connect now?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I got answer 270.
Okay, Tianhui. Good job.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, and Michael Left?
Okay, pi times 66 squared is 13,684.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I want to show you something else. Okay. So let's put your answer in. You said 13,684, right? Okay, 0.8. Okay, that's good. And I always try to tell students, you should, as a habit, get into working at least with 2 significant digits. It's like dollars and cents, right? I mean, we're economists, we deal with money. So, even a penny matters. And a lot of times, people, I don't know if you all know this. I had in my PhD program, somebody graduated ahead of me, and you know, economists a lot of times do finance work. He ended up becoming a money manager. So basically what he did is he made money, and good money. You know, he made about $500,000 a year. That was, you know, his salary and bonuses. But he traded international currencies. So if, you know, the dollar to euro exchange rate in Australia for US dollars was, you know, a tiny bit different, maybe at like the 4th or 5th decimal place different from the exchange rate between dollars and euros in Europe, then his company would take hundreds of millions of dollars, trade them for euros, and then exchange the euros back for dollars on the 2 different exchanges, and make that fraction of a penny on hundreds of millions of dollars. But it's a risk-free trade, and you know, you can make tens of thousands of dollars if you're trading in big enough volume. So it turns out that in practice in economics, precision becomes something that's important. So you have 13684.8. I hit submit, and then look at this, right? Do you see that, Michael?
Yeah.
It says yay. And that means that within the rounding error algorithm allowed by the website, you'd be scored correct. You're close enough, okay? And this is an important issue, just like we had that first question where you got to look and, you know, intelligently interpret if the question is reasonable before you answer it. The other thing that you should put a little note when you're working with Ignithium and is that when you're dealing with rounding error issues, as long as you're doing 2-digit precision, you shouldn't have any problems on the site. But every once in a while, we end up dealing with numbers that are really small. And what is a really small number in the case of Ignithium? Okay, it's a number that's less than 2, right? So we don't have here in any of our examples working with the radius of 66 and 54 and 5 and 54 and 8. There's no number less than 2 here. So 2-digit precision should always get you within the rounding error band. You won't have a problem. But if you're dealing with a number that's less than 2, and sometimes you'll be dealing with a number like, you know, 1/2, that's really small. Well, in that case, you might want to, again, make the reasonable judgment that you want to go to 4 digits worth of precision. I wouldn't do it as a habit, but it's one of those things that, again, you know, it's kind of like riding a bicycle. You got to get your balance, you got to get the wheels moving, and you got to get your handles on the handlebars. So these are just kind of like, you know, a little checklist at the beginning that if you do it, there's going to be 1 or 2 questions that you end up getting right, either on an exam or, you know, if you, again, all the homework answers are here, but if you don't understand when you're like, what did I do wrong? Seems like I'm applying the right formula. Then, you know, either there's probably something messed up with the question and you've got to look at it carefully, or you're having a rounding error issue because you're dealing with a small number. And both of those things, you know, you can fix very easily. But if you're wondering, that's the first thing to check. And again, for most of you, as you go through all this material, you probably rarely encounter those as being an issue, but those are the issues that I've seen most often. Okay, so good job, Michael. And now let's go ahead and move on to the next problem, okay? And so let's see. Shirang, are you here? Shrang?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so I'll put you as being up in charge, and let's see. And Abigail, you here?
Hi, yes, I am.
Okay, so you and Shrang are in charge of doing number 4. So yeah, so this one turns out to be a more important problem, and you all can ask any questions if you need to. Anybody have any questions? Okay, so I'll give you a minute to work on this one. Okay. Okay, so Shrang, how you doing?
Pretty good.
And Abigail, how are you doing?
Good.
Good. So do you want to go first, Shrang? You want to tell us what you think? Do you want to give us the answer or tell us how you did it?
Yeah, sure. So I basically did the base, the bottom base plus
Yeah.
5. So 53 plus 5 divided by 2 and multiplied that by 3. So the answer I got was 87.
Okay. And what do you think, Abigail? Do you agree?
Yeah, I did the same thing. I added the bases, divided by 2, and then multiplied it by the height, and I got 87 as well.
Okay, let's see. All right, Shrang and Abigail. Good job. So yeah, so calculating the area of a trapezoid, some people fight it, and I'm glad that you two didn't. You can take a trapezoid and divide it into a triangle and a rectangle, but it's just easier to take the average of the bases, base 1 plus base 2 divided by 2 and multiply by the height. It's one of those formulas that I'm sure you guys learned in 8th grade, but sometimes people forget. And if you did forget it, again, you do well to start a little note card or area of your notes where you write down a few things for working with Ignithium and put a couple formulas on there so that you have them all in one place. Okay, so any other questions? No. Okay, good. So let's see if we can find a couple better questions. So these ones I think are all pretty straightforward. I will not ask anybody to answer them just because they are. So for this equation, what's the vertical intercept? What's the horizontal intercept? For this equation, what is the slope? And for this equation, again, what's the horizontal intercept? But it's a little different, right? So it's the same question, but the equation's a little different. And what's the value of the function when x is equal to 3, that should be pretty straightforward. Now we have something a little bit different. And so does anybody have any questions on 5 through 9? Okay, if you have a question, please put one in chat. And I see there's something in chat. Okay. And okay, but it had to do with hedging. So and so but then let's talk about number 10. And I have Villa in my feed. Villa Neck. You here this morning?
Hello?
Hi. How you doing?
Hi. I'm
You
fine.
see question number 10?
Yes.
Okay. So you're going to be in charge of helping to answer that one. And how about Shelby?
Yeah,
How are you doing?
pretty good.
Good. Okay. So you're in charge of number 10 too. Okay. So I'll give you guys a minute, but you can always ask a question if you have one before you get started. Any questions?
Not yet.
Okay. So I'll give you a minute, and then we'll see what the answer is.
Professor, we can't see the questions anymore.
Okay. So how are we doing? Villa.
Uh,
Is that the right name to
is-
say your name?
yeah, it's Vila. Yeah.
Villa. Okay. And so you have an answer. What about you, Shelby? Are you good?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So
M.
you want to tell us what you came up with, Villa?
M is 53/5.
Okay. And what did you end up
I
getting, Shelby?
got -53/5.
Negative 53.
Oh, because I did 5y equals, I took the 53x to the opposite side of the equal sign.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna agree with you. But I will tell you one thing. Can you give me your answer in decimal form? Just because that's the way you would put it in to Ignithium.
10.6.
What is it?
10.6.
Minus 10.6.
Yeah.
There you go.
Ah.
Ta-da! And you obviously, Villa, you see the error you made, right? Villa? Villa?
Yes.
You see the
Uh,
error you made, right?
Yeah. Sorry about
Yeah.
that.
No, I mean, hey, it's all about learning, you know. No one's perfect. Okay. So yeah. So that's fun. I think next time we get together, and I will tell you as we go further along in these sessions, I will have assigned the work and expect that you all have looked at it, and that you draw our attention to the things that need the most attention in terms of our time, what you need help with. Since we're getting started this time, we're just going through these, and that's fine. But we won't necessarily talk about every problem on a homework. So especially if no one brings it up, I just assume that you all aren't having any issues with it. Just kind of like how we kind of skipped over those few questions at the beginning. But we could get to the next time. So we'll talk about the remainder of these questions, and then go ahead and move on. Okay, so it's 8:27. Our main lecture starts at 8:30, and normally around like 8:20 ish, I take a little break, like a 10-minute break, and I go refill my cup of coffee, and then I get started with the main lecture. So I'll see you all in about 5 minutes. Okay. All right. Bye. Okay, welcome back. So can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. So stop share. And I wanna do one other thing really quickly. Okay. So y'all should be able to see the YouTube channel where I upload my videos, right? Can you guys see that now on the screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. And so notice that I've divided it up based on what I told you were the three main topics in the class. And the first one is just supply and demand, and then consumer choice, which is basically where does demand come from, and then the theory of the firm, which is where does supply come from. So let's see. I just created these playlists, so let's see if we can. Yeah, okay. So they're roughly in the order in which we should cover the material. But I want to point out that if any of these topics are, you know, at a level of treatment that seems a little bit advanced for you, then you also find on the site that there are videos from my Principles of Economics course. So if you kind of need a review in addition to those texts and things that I suggested, then you can go ahead and look at those videos too, and they should you know, reinforce the foundation that you need in order to go ahead and be successful in the more advanced material. Okay, so so you should be watching those videos. So my main plan, particularly as we get going in the next couple of weeks, is going to be to meet with you on Tuesday and do a live Zoom session and answer questions and things like that. And then, you know, remind you about this material that's been pre-recorded and assign the pre-recorded lectures for Thursday. Now, I still plan on regularly meeting for the live session early in the morning, because it's about practicing problems and working through solutions together. So you know, that's something that should be done in a live setting. But for the main lecture, there'll be a mixture of live Zoom meetings as well as these pre-recorded lectures. So you know, if you're thirsty for content and you want to move ahead and watch some of the things, then watch them and watch them carefully. Now, I will tell you one other thing, and I think it's helpful. I don't know who else does this, so I'll ask. So let's talk to Devara. Are you there?
Hi, yeah,
How are you doing this morning?
I'm good, thanks.
Yeah. So when I watch videos on YouTube like these, do you watch them at the normal speed, or do you speed them up?
I usually go to up to like 1.5.
Yeah, me too. Almost exactly. I almost always do 1.5. If I do them on 2, you know, like double speed, it depends. Some speakers actually speak really slow, and they still sound okay on double speed. But for most speakers, if they're speaking live and you speed them up 1.5 times, then obviously you get to the material much quicker, but also like the pace for listening seems good. And I would actually recommend that. And for these videos, what I would say is, you know, go ahead and speed them up, watch them on 1.5 times. There'll be less dead time in between. You won't miss anything. And then, you know, you might want to write down the time if there's a topic that's covered in some depth, and maybe slow down and like rewatch that on like 1 or something, because you'll see that there's a lot of, you know, me talking with students, because it's sessions like this, right? And then I'll go into the actual topic that I'm lecturing on, and there may be parts of that that are kind of subtle. Well, I will tell you that there most certainly are, because the topics that we're dealing with and the level of sophistication that we're dealing with them at is going to be, you know, probably unfamiliar to most of you, because we're trying to, you know, advance your understanding. So, or at least that's what I'm trying to do. That's what we try to do in upper division, right? So, you know, introduce you to the jargon, which is the way that we use the language within the discipline to communicate with people in the discipline, so our communication can be precise and efficient. And learning that vocabulary and at the same time working through the problems. Yeah, there's some you know, subtleties. The one thing I would tell anybody who looks at this material and thinks that it's simple is that there's probably something wrong if that's your overall impression. I'm not going to say that it's you know, super detailed and you know, super sophisticated, but you have to remember, you know, there is a Nobel Prize in economics, right? And all of the people that developed these ideas and contributed to our field were you know, intellectual giants, not just within economics, but more broadly speaking. And if you ever get interested in any of these folks that through the late 19th and throughout the 20th century that developed the ideas that we're working with, that we're learning, go look at their wiki page, look at their biographies, look at who they are, and you'll realize, like, okay, you know, they're not just you know, really, they're working with things on a kind of a different level. so yeah, it's not always simple and straightforward, and you know, that's part of the reason why we have a degree in economics and you guys are taking this class. But yeah, there's lots of material here, and I, you know, certainly go through it and go through it thoroughly. Don't waste time on stuff that doesn't matter either. So okay, does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing for a minute. And so what I'm gonna do this morning is I'm gonna concentrate on some big picture ideas. And let's see. And okay, Devara, I'll ask for your help now to monitor the chat for me, okay?
Okay,
If somebody has some questions. Okay. And Okay. Now, before I get started with the main lecture, I still will ask, does anybody have any general questions or concerns or any issues? We'll have time at the very end if it's something more particular to you. But if you had a general question, now'd be a good time to ask. Any? No. Okay. So I will start with a general question. What is economics? And does anybody want to volunteer an answer? Okay. Oh, well, I saw something in chat. Devara, is that a response to my question?
Michael is asking the study of the flow of wealth.
Oh, okay. So he says a study of the flow of wealth. Okay. Is this Michael left or is it another Michael?
Yeah, it's Michael left.
Okay. Anybody else? You guys can put a couple other things in chat. Okay, we've got a number 2. What?
Michael Barb is asking study of scarcity of resources and its impact on people.
Okay, number 3.
It was just Michael F saying true. Arslan says my principal's professor at community college called it managing finite resources in a world of finite ones, of infinite ones.
Of infinite ones, yeah. Okay. So yeah. So there are a lot of people and there are a lot of textbooks that will focus in on scarcity, and I think scarcity is, you know, an important concept within economics. But you have to understand the role that scarcity plays. And I'll just say, I'm not even going to write it down, at least not right now. Maybe in a minute I will. But has anybody thought about? So there are some textbooks that will define economics as the study of scarcity. But has anybody thought about, like, well, okay, what role is scarcity really playing here? So who was it? Was Arslan. Arslan, do you have your mic this morning? I know you had a mic last time. So
I do. Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How you doing?
Pretty good. So what do you think? So your professor said that, and who did you have anyway? Which community college did you go to?
Long Beach City.
Long Beach City. Do you remember his name?
Yeah, Fred Beebe. I loved his class, and as a professor, and that's what made me be an econ major, actually.
Okay, yeah, you know, we have a lot of good ones. I have a buddy of mine at Fullerton Community College named Francis Mummery, and he is a great teacher. And so yeah, so there's some really good ones out there. I've never heard of Fred Beebe, but I'll have to keep my ear open. Nice to hear that there are good things going on at Long Beach City College. So but do you ever think about it, like, okay, why is it, you know, scarcity? Like, what's the role here? What's the real?
Yeah, I think it's just that there are finite resources as far as like how you can.
Yeah, which is scarcity, right?
Which is scarcity.
Yeah.
And so, like the definition you gave, I think it's just that, like, as people, we have infinite wants. We always want more, right?
Yeah.
With the option.
And yeah, so, have you ever thought about that? I mean, you know, somebody who's a complete and total ascetic Zen Buddhist monk, you know, has no attachments in the world, and you know, their only want is to not want.
Well, you know? Now we're getting a bit philosophical.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I wonder about these things. Like, yeah, well, what about that guy? Does he fit? but
I think
but
he still kind of fits just because food is a limited resource, right? Ultimately,
yeah,
water probably will be at some point.
yeah.
Presumably air will as well. We all have needs that need to be met. And so I think economics helps like societies, governments, what have you, manage those resources.
Well, I'll tell you this. So suppose that the whole world is filled with Buddhist monks that are ascetic and don't want for nothing, right? And then there's one regular Joe, let's call him Professor Hunter, with infinite wants, right? If we add a bunch of zeros to infinity, or a bunch of say their wants are finite, let's say 2 kilograms of biomass a year, that's all they need to sustain themselves, right? To Dr. Hunter, who is obsessed with material wealth and wants bling and bougie and all that stuff, add a bunch of finite numbers to infinity, what do you get?
Infinity still?
Yeah, right. So all you need is one person for the whole economy to be stuck back in the situation he talked about, right? Infinite wants. Not everybody has to be a greedy SOB. You just need one. Right? So I think that that's a pretty good characterization, but I still go back to this question that I was asking you. So you put that together, infinite wants, finite resources, and what is it really, what's the, okay, that gives us our discipline. Have you thought about that? Does it?
I'm drawing a blank right now.
Well, I'll tell you, it's fine. But I think a lot of people would do the same thing that you did. And, I did it. I don't know, I started studying, well, I graduated with my bachelor's degree in December 1994, because I didn't graduate. I graduated like mid-year from Cal State Fullerton. And I think that I probably did exactly what you're doing, which is like, yeah, okay, I accept that, and move on. It's okay. But the truth is that when you have finite resources and infinite wants, you have to make choices, right? Because some of the wants are going to be satisfied and other ones are not, right? So scarcity, a lot of times, economics has subfields and depending upon where you are, like at UCI, for example, they have a whole department of decision science, but really it's just a bunch of economists. And what you'll see as we go forward in this class is really what we end up studying is human decisions. It's and there's a positive, remember, positive is scientifically descriptive, and there's a normative aspect. The normative aspect is like what we should do, what's best, what's the you would say normative stuff normally involves some sort of ethical implications, right? And we talk about both things in economics, but what we're really trying to do is we're trying to characterize the decision-making process of people as they make decisions. And resources is also a very general term. When we talk about resources, I don't know if you remember this. I'm sure Professor Beebe did this, Arslan. do you remember him talking about resources and putting them into categories like land,
Labor, capital.
Those are the main ones. But sometimes people go further into a more detailed subdivision, and they'll talk about human capital, and sometimes they'll make another category of natural resources. But these are just ways of describing categories of resources. The list could go on and on and on in terms of categories. But this is kind of like, it's common to list these. In truth, and a resource in economics is anything with an opportunity cost. So, one of the things that gets studied a lot of time is the allocation of time, right? How much time do you spend working? They have this in labor economics, and we may get a chance to talk about it a little. It's an extension of or an application of utility theory, which we will study in detail, but it's called the labor leisure choice model. How do I decide how much time to work and how much time to goof off, right? I've only got so much time, so time is finite. And, I'd like to work an infinite amount if I could, because I'd make tons of money. But I'd also like to spend an infinite amount of time playing, but guess what? I can't do both. So this makes our discipline really broad, right? In fact, economists study everything from the decision of how couples in a household divide up their time between chores and other things that are done for the house. It's a household production model. People end up studying mate selection, like whether people get married or how long they date. Economists do that. So marriage and family stuff. And again, the reason why is that, you've only got so much time. How are you going to spend your time with different people? And how do you know how much time to devote to a relationship and when to call it quits, right? So that's amenable to economic analysis. These are general categories because they involve, broad ideas of resources at a social level that are finite. And, that's where the scarcity shows up most clearly, right? But I would encourage you, and everybody in the class, to begin to try to think about, well, what are the limits of our discipline? Is there anything to which economics can't be applied, which again involves some sort of a decision-making process? Because ultimately, scarcity, the idea that you said of, finite resources and infinite wants, puts us in the world of having to make choices. And so there are a lot of people that define economics as a study of choices. I'm okay with that. I don't have a problem with it. The definition that I prefer, and I'm going to put it down here, is, so economics is the that one. So economics is the scientific study of resource allocation mechanisms. I think that covers everything that economics is. It entails or includes the idea of scarcity, because the whole idea of allocating resources to different uses implies that, you know, there's something substantive about that, with which in the absence of scarcity, you wouldn't have to worry about allocation, right? You just give everybody everything that they possibly could want. But the thing that I think is often left out, but it's mentioned in many texts, is that economics is a science. And so does anybody have any comments about economics being a science? Do you think it is? Does it make you laugh? I'll tell you, and I'll look for somebody else in chat, and unless you want to keep chatting, Arslan, that's fine. Sometimes I stick with somebody who wants to chat for a while. But I had a guy that I knew that had a PhD in physics, and I told him that economics was a science. So yeah, we're just like you, we're a science. And he laughed. And you know, you would have thought like maybe it like hurt my feelings, but it didn't. It just made me think, God, you haven't really thought about this. You don't really know what science is. So I laughed with him. Because you figure like a science, somebody with a PhD in physics, well, gosh, you know, that's you know, somebody who should know a lot about science. But it's funny how people kind of pigeonhole themselves, and you know, I'm sure he was a great physicist, but he hadn't really thought about things beyond that, maybe. But it's important. So what does anybody have any thoughts? Like, what do you guys think? Why I am concerned that we properly label economics as a science?
Hi, Professor. The one like main thing that I think like agree it's a science is just like
who's talking right now, because I can't see.
Benjamin.
Hey, Benjamin.
Yeah. So the same way like in biology or any other like hard science, you could formulate a hypothesis and test it and it becomes a theory. I mean, you could easily do that in economics too. You could think of a hypothesis, test it out, and it becomes a theory. So like, I think that questioning aspect of economics kind of makes it a science.
Yeah, and you know, actually, you're right, and what you said, I agree with entirely. What makes a science as opposed to a humanity or an art is that you're using the scientific method to evaluate ideas, to accumulate knowledge. And you're exactly right. You know, the scientific method that everybody's familiar with, which is you develop a hypothesis, and then you test that hypothesis with some sort of an experiment with data. And if your hypothesis, which is your guess about what you think you'll find in the data, if your hypothesis properly describes the data, then you know you got two choices. You know, the main one is that you continue doing testing. All scientists, including physicists, are really trying to break their models. They're trying to find good ways of testing their hypotheses or their theories to find out when they don't work, right? And so the work of science is never done, and knowledge is continually accumulated. But it may not sound like, you know, a great achievement, but in lots of ways, you know, every scientist is happy when they find data that's inconsistent with their hypothesis, that says their hypothesis is wrong. And it's because that's the easiest way to learn, right? I broke it, and so now I've got to, you know, reevaluate what I thought. And this is something that's going on in economics right now. And it has been going on for a while. Our discipline, as you pointed out, Benjamin, is a little bit different than maybe some of the, you know, traditional physical or biological sciences, because our ability to conduct, you know, experiments is sort of limited. And it's primarily limited by an ethical consideration, right? Since we're trying to understand how human beings make decisions, we can't really do, you know, Boys of Brazil, you know, clone experiment, you know, on a massive scale and get lots of data and treat people different ways. Instead, you know, most of our data is observational data. Okay, so I'll say constraints or challenges in applying the scientific method in human decision making. And, you know, for ethical reasons, most, and I'll put in capitals, most of the data used in economics is observational. Meaning that, and sometimes people will say this, you know, natural experiments. So I can tell you right now, because of the coronavirus pandemic and because of the policy responses to shutting down a lot of the economy, there's a lot being learned by economists. This is a natural experiment. I mean, there were tons of economists who have been studying recessions and things like that for years, you know, decades. And there's a limited amount of data. This isn't a class in macroeconomics, but I'll just point out really quickly that usually, you know, economic data at the macroeconomic level comes out quarterly or annually, right? And we've only been keeping track of GDP based on current methods of calculating GDP since about 1942. So that means that we have less than 100 observations on an annual basis, and you know, even if you say we're going to do it on a quarterly basis, if that's meaningful, then you know, you still have you know, less than 400 observations, and that's a really tiny number of observations to you know, refine your hypotheses and develop your theories. So this means there's a small sample problem in observational data. So small samples. But there were a bunch of the macroeconomists are like, gee, you know, we just like to shut down the economy randomly to see how it responds and learn from that, you know, what happens after recessions with economic recovery and things like that. And so they're learning a ton right now. But recently, within the last 20 years, there's a Nobel Prize winner, and he came to visit our campus. I think it was a year and a half ago, just before the coronavirus shutdown, named Vernon Smith. Vernon Smith is a Nobel Prize winner that is in residence. He has a research institute at Chapman University in Orange County. And Vernon is known for doing what they call experimental economics. He helped develop the field. So in an experimental economics, they answer microeconomic questions about how people make decisions by actually having them go in and participate in what you might call games in a computer lab and play for real money. So I don't know. I did a sabbatical at Chapman a few years ago and had a chance to work with Vernon and some of his group. But you probably, I think, once, you know, let's say we got another 6 months of being shut down. After that, I think next fall, you guys can probably volunteer to be in their subject pool if you want to, if you're willing to drive down to their campus and do an experiment. So, you know, economists have realized they have this small sample problem. It's an observational discipline. So in that sense, it's more like studying the climate, right? Or cosmology, where you're studying the stars, because there's like only one universe to observe from where we are. We can only see certain pieces of it. So you can see that in the context of an observational discipline, the ability to, you know, test certain hypotheses is limited, and experimental economics is trying to overcome that. But we are a scientific discipline, which means that our understanding evolves and it changes. You know, everything that we think about the economy in this class, and the economic decisions that people make, you know, it's being refined, it's being improved, and on the basis of new data. So you all will have a good opportunity to engage in some lifelong learning if you keep up with the discipline throughout your careers. Okay. And the other thing I'll say is, we already talked about resource allocation mechanisms, but this is pretty broad, but it's specific. So allocation is another word for assignment. So you're assigning resources to different uses, and the mechanism is really like the procedure or the way that things happen, right? It's kind of this broad idea, but there are a lot of different mechanisms for allocating resources that economists study. And so if you ever see a situation, you're like, you know, this is obviously, some people are getting something and some people aren't. That's a mechanism, right? And I say people, but you know, that also includes production, because firms are run by human beings too. So if they're receiving it, you know, in a productive capacity to be used in production and passed on, that's still an allocation. So allocation to production and to consumption, some are getting it and some aren't. Then there's a mechanism behind there for that assignment. And so you could even, you know, think about, you know, feudal societies and the way that, you know, relationships in a feudal society determine who get different plots of land or who does certain types of work. Economists have thought about that, and I already talked about household decisions. But it's a really, there are lots of mechanisms out there that are being studied and could be studied, but maybe aren't right now. So if you all happen to think of any that you're curious about, I would also encourage everybody in the class to think about maybe in the not too distant future to you know, compete in the CSU research competition and do some research as an undergraduate. There are lots of benefits, but one of the chief ones is that you just learn by doing, through thinking through problems, and you'll be doing that your whole career. So, and if you win, then it's a really nice thing to put on your resume. So the other type of mechanisms that we study formally are auction mechanisms. So you guys might have heard of a Dutch or an English auction. Those are some more like concrete examples. In this class, we'll mostly be studying the mechanism that you're familiar with, which is the market mechanism. So we'll be talking about, you know, competitive markets and other types of markets are the main mechanism. And it's just because, you know, in modern societies, the competitive market, or the market more generally, is the main one used for allocating resources. And I'll also say this, and this kind of goes back to scarcity, and something that you should think about. And so I said allocation mechanisms, but something that really kind of gets to the heart of it, and and allocation mechanisms, that's the way we talk about it most often in economics. But you also see that sometimes we use the word rationing mechanism. And I think that really gets to the heart of the issue of scarcity, at least at a social level, because the big issue in rationing is it makes it really clear at the outset that not everybody is going to get served, right? Not everybody is going to get the same service or the same good. Can anybody think of a really recent example where rationing has really come to the surface? Anybody?
Hand sanitizer.
Hand sanitizer. I didn't know there was a rationing hand sanitizer, but maybe, yeah, you go into Costco and they say you can only get like 2 bottles or something. So I saw something else come up in the chat.
Michael and Benjamin said toilet paper, and then
Toilet.
William said COVID vaccine.
COVID vaccine, yeah. Well, all those are really great examples. The one in particular, and the only reason why I mention it is because the word rationing actually is used. So in the context that you're talking about, yeah, they say like you can only, certain people can get the COVID vaccine and some people don't, but they don't normally use the word, we're rationing it. But the word rationing in particular has been used in the case of patients in the hospital for COVID-19 treatment. They because we went into like the red and the purple zone and and it also, I don't know if you guys read about this. I read a story about Brazil just a couple days ago where they were rationing oxygen. So as you all probably know, COVID-19, for people that get really sick, it damages their lungs, and they often need supplemental oxygen treatment to survive. Even if they're going to get well and they don't have to go on a ventilator for a while, they need oxygen, and so they were rationing oxygen supplies, and because the hospitals were so overwhelmed here, even in the United States, they started to ration care. And what that meant, at least in the context of the hospital, is they had protocols for only using ventilators and only using what you would call, extreme methods for trying to keep people alive, for people who they thought would survive. So they started to say, okay, listen, if you come in and you need these treatments to survive, like, oftentimes when you get put on a ventilator, you have to be, sedated heavily. And they didn't have enough ventilators and they didn't have enough medication to sedate people. They said, listen, if you're, really old and you're otherwise really ill and we think you're going to die, we're not even going to, give you a chance. We're just going to assign the ventilator to somebody who's younger, who we think is going to make it. And so yeah, rationing care is one place where if you guys were to Google, rationing care for COVID-19 treatment, you're going to see articles and things like that where they're actually using that word. But it hits this point that deals with scarcity, that not everybody is going to get served. And the interesting thing about the competitive market, or the market in general, is it's what we call a price rationing mechanism. And so when I say price rationing, does that ring any bells? Does that sound like, do you know what that means? Benjamin, do you know what I mean by that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time? It cut out a little bit.
Yeah, so when I say that the market uses price rationing, do you know what I mean by that?
I mean, I exactly no, but I could try and kind of connect the dots. Like I was thinking that, if the market just allows all, low prices, then there would be no scarcity. So they need to have these prices to control who gets it and how much of like that item they get.
Yeah, so I think you're on the same wavelength as what I'm talking about. Does anybody else want to try to describe price rationing? Do we have no takers? Okay. So yeah, basically, so rationing is deciding who gets it and who doesn't, right? And when we're talking about rationing healthcare, the way the doctors were doing it is they had this protocol that, well, based on these other conditions and your age and your health status, if we think you got a good chance of surviving, we're going to give you a ventilator. And if not, we're not going to give you a ventilator. So again, they're deciding who's going to get one and who's not. Well, in the market, price plays that role. So if you can pay the price, you get the good. And if you can't, you don't, right? And I'm saying it in kind of a stark way, and it depends upon who you would talk to, the way that they would describe this. But for price rationing, some people would say if you're willing to pay the price at which the good is being offered, then you get it. But if you're not willing to pay the price, but I just want to be sure that we understand that willingness and ability to pay are really tightly linked concepts, right? If you're willing to pay it, then that implies that you have the ability to actually pay it. And oftentimes, ability to pay is a deeper concern, particularly if we're dealing with things like food and housing and things that people usually believe are necessities. Then if a lot of times people talk about affordable housing crisis and things like that. And I'm not saying whether I agree with the language or I don't, but I think there's a good observation that people are homeless or if they're struggling finding housing, that maybe the price of rent is such that it's a little bit inaccurate to just say, well, they're not willing to pay the rent. Maybe there's also an affordability issue. They want to live someplace, and based on their income, maybe they don't have the ability. And we know that also is kind of come to the front. So in COVID-19, with there being eviction moratoriums and things like that, because a lot of people are suddenly thrown out of work. So I saw something else popped up in the chat. I don't know if it's relevant to our discussion, but
Michael Left said he thinks it's willing for elastic goods, but ability for inelastic goods.
yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that I would break it down quite so sharply, but I will say that one of the key ideas that we're going to talk about in this class is the idea of willingness to pay, or WTP. So, and we'll define that in later lectures. But obviously, if you're willing to pay, then you have to be able to pay it. So it entails, or it includes, an assumed ability to pay in a certain amount. And a lot of people have talked about that. So, okay. So to summarize, economics is a scientific study of resource rationing or allocation mechanisms. And when we're talking about economics, we're really talking about human beings making decisions. the last thing I want to leave you guys with today is, let me see, okay, is you know, what are our jobs? So like we get down to actual things that we're going to do, what we're going to learn to do in this class. So what do economists do in analyzing resource allocation mechanisms? And the reason why I want to point this out is this is really like to orient you. I mean, if you're gonna pay attention to only the things that you gotta know in this class, you know, you gotta know we're gonna talk all about supply and demand, we're gonna talk about consumer choice, and we're gonna talk about the theory of the firm. You should have that structured in your mind. And then you should also know, okay, when we talk about these topics and in each one of those topics, we're describing these rationing mechanisms or the way that people are making decisions to allocate the resources. Same thing, right? What happens? Then there's this, you know, what we call positive / descriptive component. And what that is the way we answer it is we're trying to figure out or describe what is the equilibrium. And notice that I just said, and I'll say, let's see. Christy, are you here this morning? Christy Lau? Christy? Okay. Oh. Did Christy Lau come on or no? How about Sienna? You there?
Hello, I'm here.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good, you?
Good. So notice that I said, oh, so what do we do? And one of the things we do is we describe what the equilibrium is. Do you notice how I said is?
Yeah.
Do you kind of get what I mean? What I'm trying to say is that the equilibrium is just something that happens. You know, it doesn't have anything to do. I mean, even if we weren't studying economics at all, right? We would still observe the equilibrium. It's like, you know, my Christmas tree that's still up. It's just there. You know what I mean? So as economists, what we're trying to do is describe the equilibrium really so we can predict it, so we understand it. And it just is. It has nothing to do with whether it's good or it's bad. It just is. That's one of our jobs. And then our second job is to, and this is normative, is to determine whether the equilibrium is efficient. And so I'll ask you, Sienna, do you see why that might be a normative concept? And I'll just put good, bad.
So what I believe is that positive and descriptive is just like, as you said, it just is. Whereas normative is either like questioning, is it good, bad?
Yeah, and so and I would I would say, I guess my question is, do you see why like maybe this concept of efficiency is normative? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. do you have any
Yeah.
more? Can you put any meat on that bone? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's asking, okay, so the efficiency is like you look at the economy. Now we're looking at different things like as whereas positive is like, okay, this is how it's going to be. As normative, we're going to do like the efficiency. Is this good for the people? Is this bad? There's different angles to go through that.
Yeah. So and this is actually kind of a little bit of a controversy within the economics discipline itself as we speak. It has been for a while, but it's kind of resurfaced as an issue. And that is that we can describe an equilibrium and potentially predict it without ever talking about whether the outcome is economically efficient. But economists, as a habit, and we'll spend a lot of time in this class characterizing the efficiency of different economic mechanisms, different economic outcomes. I mean, the best example I can give you right off the top of my head that you guys can probably relate to is the difference between competition and monopoly. Normally, in most economic analyses that are done of monopoly, the first thing that's pointed out is that a monopoly is inefficient, right? So we can describe the monopoly outcome. We can describe the monopoly equilibrium. And if there's a monopoly, we know the monopoly's there, we can predict what's going to happen. And normally our prediction boils down to describing the equilibrium is just describing the price and the quantity. That's generally what we do. So that's what I mean by outcome is the price and quantity that show up in the market under different conditions. But then right away we say, oh, well, the monopoly is inefficient. And we have a way of measuring that. We use this concept of net social benefit, or you might have heard of it called total surplus. Net social benefit and total surplus are the same thing. There's just a little bit different way of calculating net social benefit. But when we say that competition is efficient and monopoly is not, it's like we're saying, oh, we shouldn't have monopoly. Do you see what I mean, Sienna?
Yes. So it's as normative economics is how things should be in the economy.
Yeah, and so when I say monopoly is inefficient, it sounds technical, but in one sense, what I'm saying is, oh, it's bad, right?
Yeah.
You know, I'm just saying monopoly's bad, competition's good, and then I'm using this idea of efficiency to distinguish between like what's good and what's bad, and that's where a lot of people kind of get concerned, because it sounds like economists are becoming policymakers. They're becoming advocates, right? Advocates means I support something, right? So I support economic outcomes that are efficient. And I just want to point out here at the beginning, because we're going to talk a lot about efficiency in this class and how to measure it. You can measure efficiency as just purely a scientific thing. Okay, there's this measure of efficiency. This is, how I characterize efficiency. And really what we're going to do is we're going to say, this is the total surplus for one outcome, like the total surplus for calculate total surplus for competition. I calculate total surplus for monopoly. The total surplus for competition is bigger. so it's more efficient, right? I can do that, but and then still stop short and say, well, that just is a thing, right? It's a number I calculated, and not go the extra step of saying, therefore, competition is better than monopoly. And it just depends upon the economists that you talk to. Some economists are really, really happy to be advocates for efficiency as being, you know, a really important consideration or a driver of the, and notice what I'm saying, the types of decisions society should make, right? I'm going to try not to do that, because it turns out that, you know, and economists have learned this in lots of different places, that, you know, efficiency is just one consideration. Ultimately, policymakers make the decisions that they're going to make for lots of different reasons. And I, as an economist, I'm not going to criticize those. I will say that, you know, personally, that I think efficiency is a really important issue for policymakers to consider. And as a practical matter, lots of policymakers have teams of economists. You guys may work for them. I've worked for public agencies that make decisions, and they often are concerned about efficiency, because honestly, if you continually make inefficient policy decisions, then you can see the detrimental impacts on the standard of living, the quality of life of people that live in political situations where efficiency is ignored. And I don't know if you all, I mean, it's kind of a poster child right now for inefficient economic decisions and human suffering, but it's, you know, Venezuela. So I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to what's going on down there, but there's a lot of good documentaries on all of the inefficient decisions that the government's made, and the bad consequences for people that live there. So with that in mind, I just wanted to make sure I emphasize to you what you're going to see for each of these topics. And it's going to take us a little while to develop them, but our objectives are clear. We want to study supply and demand and competitive markets well enough that we can describe the equilibrium. And secondly, so we can calculate how efficient the equilibrium outcome is. And then we're going to move on again to talk about consumer choice and where demand comes from. And then we'll come back to study different types of equilibria at the end of the course, and you know, monopoly and duopoly and all these different types of equilibrium outcomes. We'll talk about each one of them, and then we'll characterize them in terms of the way that, you know, we can assign an efficiency measure to each one of them. And that's all we're going to do. The whole course, we'll be talking about, you know, how to characterize the equilibrium and how to measure its efficiency in all these different settings. And so if you're ever looking for kind of like a guiding light, you know, okay, Dr. Hunter, what are we doing? Then, you know, always, you know, either you can remind yourself, you can ask me and say, listen, are we trying to calculate the equilibrium, or are we trying to measure efficiency? And we'll only be doing one of those two things. That's it. So that's all I have for you guys for today. Please go and watch the video on welfare, and you know, you can play it on you can speed it up, and then we'll come back on next Tuesday. Do you guys have any questions for me? I'm going to go ahead and